everyone, so today we're going to be looking at chapter 13 and 14 of Black Beauty. So let's start with chapter 13. The Devil's Trademark. One day when John and I had been out on some business of our master's and were returning gently on a long straight road, at some distance we saw a boy trying to leap a pony over the gate. The pony would not take the leap and the boy cut him with the whip, but he only turned off on one side. He whipped him again, but the pony turned off on the other side. Then the boy got off and gave him a hard thrashing and knocked him about the head. Then he got up again and tried to make him leap the gate, kicking him all the time shamefully, but still the pony refused. When we were nearly at the spot, the pony put down his head and threw up his heels and sent the boy neatly over into a broad, quickset hedge, and with the rein dangling from his head, he set off home at full gallop. John laughed quite loud. "Served him right," he said. "Oh, oh, oh," cried the boy as he struggled amongst the thorns. "I say, come and help me out." "Thank ye," said John. "I think you are quite in the right place, and maybe a little scratching will teach you not to leap a pony over a gate that is too high for him." And so with that, John rode off. "It may be," he said to himself, that young fellow is a liar as well as a cruel one. We'll just go home by Farmer Bushby's, Beauty, and then if anybody wants to know, you and I can tell him, you see." So we turned off to the right and soon came up to the stackyard and within sight of the house. The farmer was hurrying out into the road and his wife was standing at the gate, looking very frightened. "Have you seen my boy?" said Mr. Bushby as we came up. "He went out an hour ago on my black pony, and the creature has just come back without a rider." "I should think, sir," said John, "he had better be without a rider unless he can be ridden properly." "What do you mean?" said the farmer. "Well, sir, I saw your son whipping and kicking and knocking that good little pony about shamefully because he would not leap over a gate that was just too high for him. The pony behaved well, sir, and showed no vice, but at last he just threw up his heels and tipped the young gentleman into the thorn hedge. He wanted me to help him out, but I hope you will excuse me, sir. I did not feel inclined to do so. There was no bones broken, sir. He'll only get a few scratches. I love horses, and it riles me to see them badly used. It is a bad plan to aggravate an animal till he uses his heels. The first time is not always the last." During this, the mother began to cry. "Oh, my poor Bill! I must go and meet him. He must be hurt." "You had better go into that house, wife," said the farmer. "Bill wants a lesson about this, and I must see that he gets it. This is not the first time nor the second that he has ill-used that pony, and I shall stop it. I'm much obliged to you, Manly. Good evening." So we went on, John chuckling all the way home. Then he told James about it, who laughed and said, "Serve him right. I knew that boy at school. He took great airs on himself because he was the farmer's son. He used to swagger about and bully the little boys. Of course, we elder ones would not have any of that nonsense, and let him know that in the school and the playground, farmers' sons and labourers' sons were all alike. I well remember one day, just before afternoon school, I found him at the large window catching flies and pulling off their wings. He did not see me, and I gave him a box on the ears that laid him sprawling on the floor. Well angry as I was almost frightened. He roared and bellowed in such a style. The boys rushed in from the playground, and the master ran in from the road to see who was being murdered. Of course, I said fair and square at once what I'd done and why. Then I showed the master the flies, some crushed and some crawling about helpless, and I showed him all the wings on the windowsill. I never saw him so angry before, but as Bill was still howling and whining like the coward that he was, he did not give him any more punishment of that kind, but set him up on a stool for the rest of the afternoon and said that he could not go out to play for that week. Then he talked to all the boys very seriously about cruelty, and said how hard-hearted and cowardly it was to hurt the weak and the helpless. But what stuck in my mind was this. He said that cruelty was the devil's own trademark, and that if we saw anyone who took pleasure in cruelty, we might know who he belonged to, for the devil was a murderer from the beginning and a tormentor to the end. On the other hand, where we saw people who loved their neighbours and were kind to man and beast, we might know that was God's mark." "Your master never taught you a truer thing," said John. "There is no religion without love, and people may talk as much as they like about their religion, but if it does not teach them to be good and kind to man and beast, it is all a sham, James, and it won't stand when things come to be turned inside out." Chapter 14. James Howard. Early one morning in December, John had just led me into my box after my daily exercise and was strapping my cloth on, and James was coming in from the corn chamber with some oats when the master came into the stable. He looked rather serious and held an open letter in his hand. John fastened the door of my box, touched his cap, and waited for orders. "Good morning, John," said the master. "I want to know if you have any complaint to make of James." "Complaint, sir? No, sir." "Is he industrious at his work and respectful to you?" "Yes, sir, always." "You never find he slights his work when your back is turned?" "Never, sir." "That's well, but I must put another question. Have you no reason to suspect, when he goes out with the horses to exercise them or to take a message, that he stops about talking to his acquaintance or goes into houses where he has no business, leaving the horse outside?" "No, sir, certainly not. And if anybody has been saying that about James, I don't believe it. And I don't mean to believe it unless I have it fairly proved before witnesses. It's not for me to say who has been trying to take away James's character, but I will say this, sir, that a steadier, pleasanter, honester, smarter young fellow I never had in this stable. I can trust his word and I can trust his work. He is gentle and clever with the horses, and I would rather have them in charge with him than with half the young fellows I know of in laced hats and liveries. And whoever wants a character of James Howard," said John, with a decided jerk of his head, "let them come to John Manley." The master stood all this time grave and attentive, but as John finished his speech with a broad smile over his face, spread over his face, and looked kindly across at James, who all this time stood still at the door, he said, "James, my lad, set down the oats and come here. I am very glad to find that John's opinion of your character agrees so exactly with my own. John is a cautious man," he said with a droll smile, "and it is not always easy to get his opinion about people, so I thought if I beat the bush on this side, the birds would fly out, and I should learn what I wanted to know quickly. So now we will come to business. I have a letter from my brother-in-law, Sir Clifford Williams of Clifford Hall. He wants me to find him a trustworthy young groom, about 20 or 21, who knows his business, his old coachman, who has lived with him 30 years and is getting feeble, and he wants a man to work with him and get into his ways, who would be able, when the old man was pensioned off, oh, the cat's come to join us, to step into his place. He would have 18 shillings a week at first, a stable suit, a driving suit, a bedroom over the coach house, and a boy under him. Sir Clifford is a good master, and if you could get the place, it would be a good start for you. I don't want to part with you, and if you left us, I know John would lose his right hand." "That I should, sir," said John, "but I would not stand in his light for the world." "How old are you, James?" said the master. 19 next May, sir." "That's young. What do you think, John?" "Well, sir, it is young, but he is as steady as a man and is strong and well grown, and though he has not had much experience in driving, he has a light, firm hand and a quick eye, and he is very careful. I'm quite sure no horse of his will be ruined. His will be ruined for want of having his feet and shoes looked after." "Your word will go furthest, John," said the master, for Sir Clifford adds in a postscript, "if you could find a man trained by your John, I should like him better than any other. So, James, lad, think it over. Talk to your mother at dinner time, and let them know what you wish. Sorry. In a few days after this conversation, it was fully settled that James should go to Clifford Hall in a month or 6 weeks, as it suited his master, and in the meantime he was going to get all the practice in driving that could be given to him. I never knew the carriage to go out so often before. When the mistress did not go out, the master drove himself in the two-wheeled chaise. But now, whether it was master or young ladies, or only an errand, Ginger and I were put in the carriage, and James drove us. At the first, John rode with him on the box, telling him this and that, and after that, James drove alone. Then it was wonderful what a number of places the master would go in the city on a Saturday, and what queer streets we were driven through. He was sure to go to the railway station just as the train was coming in, and cabs and carriages, carts and omnibuses were all trying to get over the bridge together. That bridge wanted good horses and good drivers when the railway bell was ringing, for it was narrow and there was a very sharp turn up into the station, where it would not have been at all difficult for people to run into each other if they did not look sharp and keep their wits about them. There we go. So we have finished looking at chapter 13 and 14. Tomorrow we'll be looking at chapter 15. As you can see, we have been joined by Stix the cat. You are going to need to do the quiz that is on My Maths for this. So there's going to be a quiz set with multiple choice answers. Have a look at that one. I'm really impressed with how many of the answers you managed to get right on the true or false quiz today. So we will see you tomorrow with the next instalment of Black Beauty.